America began in December of 1606, when 3 small ships left England to establish the first permanent English colony in America. They were the Susan Constant, Godspeed, and the Discovery. There were 144 men aboard, and they knew almost nothing of what lay ahead. The crossing of the uncharted Atlantic Ocean was an act of unparalleled bravery as they endured violent storms and untold hardships. Their adventure was to become one of the supreme achievements in world history. The first landing was at Cape Henry, Virginia, at the entrance to Chesapeake Bay on April 26, 1607. While exploring both banks of the James River, they almost certainly had the specter of the lost colony of Roanoke on their minds, remembering those first settlers that vanished some 20 years before, just 100 miles south of here. On May 13th, on the banks of the James River, they selected the site for the first permanent English colony in North America. The place was named Jamestown for King James. A triangular fort was built. Although little is known about these first settlers, continued research is increasing our knowledge. The colony survived many severe hardships, including Indian attacks, starvation, disease, and the burning of the colony. Under the leadership of Captain John Smith, they endured the worst terrors imaginable. In the well-known story, John Smith himself was saved from death at the hands of the Indians by Pocahontas, daughter of a tribal chief. Slowly, though, the Jamestown colony evolved and eventually began to prosper, thanks partly to the growing and shipping of tobacco. Soon other ships began arriving, bringing new settlers and fresh supplies. In 1619, the governor convened the first representative legislative assembly in the New World. Our state legislatures and National Congress directly descend from this early assembly at Jamestown. Today, the spirit and history of Jamestown is preserved and interpreted by the National Park Service at Colonial National Historic Park, a major visitor attraction which includes Jamestown and Yorktown, where the climactic battle of the Revolutionary War was fought. The exact site of the original Jamestown fort has been discovered, and archaeologists are unearthing a treasure of relics and clues about what life was like inside that early fort. Nearby, the state of Virginia operates Jamestown Settlement, with a recreation of the original settlement, including the fort and the 3 famous ships. By 1650, Jamestown was flourishing, despite Indian attacks and an unhealthy location partly surrounded by swamps. In 1698, the new State House at Jamestown accidentally burned. This was the final blow, resulting in a decision to move the seat of government 16 miles to a town called Middle Plantation. Jamestown had been the capital of the colony of Virginia for over 90 years. In 1620, some 13 years after the founding of Jamestown, another brave band of pilgrims left Plymouth, England, braving the same hardships their early predecessors had endured. They landed later in the year at a place they named Plymouth. Popular tradition has it that the pilgrims first landed on the large rock whose name, Plymouth Rock, is known and revered by most Americans. Today, it is one of America's most visited historic sites. Overlooking the portico that contains Plymouth Rock is a statue of the revered Indian Massasoit that helped the pilgrims to survive the dreadful winter of 1621. In 1957, a replica of the Mayflower, Mayflower II, was built and offered as a gift to America by England. Appropriately, it sailed from Plymouth, England, and remains anchored at Plymouth, Massachusetts today. A few years after their landing, the Pilgrims had firmly established England's second colony in the New World. Middle Plantation was soon renamed Williamsburg. It was a small settlement when the capital was moved from Jamestown to here in 1699. However, it was already the home of the College of William and Mary, founded 6 years earlier. Soon the new capital began a rapid growth, with construction beginning on several new important public buildings, including a new capitol, the Bruton Parish Church, and the Governor's Palace. By the early 1720s, all of these public buildings were substantially completed, and legislative bodies, including the Colonial Assembly, began their sessions within. It may well be that American democracy was nurtured here, at the old Williamsburg Courthouse, for everyday people, and others like Patrick Henry observed and debated legal injustices and the state of the colonies.
I don't know whether or not he had a hand in starting the massacre in Boston. I do know that bloodshed there would have been impossible had there not been British troops.
The city developed during the next half-century into a stage where world-shaking events would take place. By the middle of the 18th century, Williamsburg had grown into a very cosmopolitan city, crown jewel of the English nation of Raleigh's dream. Today, Williamsburg is one of the world's most popular visitor attractions. Presidents, royalty, and just average people visit here in great numbers. They come from near and far to see one of the finest architectural restorations on this planet. Not just buildings alone, though, but an authentic atmosphere that blends the old world of colonial England and Europe with a new world of America today. To walk these streets is to relive America's glorious past. John D. Rockefeller deserves the thanks for beginning this magnificent recreation of where America began. The unsurpassed beauty and uniqueness of the American landscape is known throughout the world. Nowhere else can one find such a varied panorama of astounding miracles of nature, including the world's largest canyon, the largest freshwater lake, the mightiest waterfall, the tallest geysers, the largest caverns, the most beautiful valleys, the largest and tallest trees, the most famous desert, the greatest variety of towering mountains. Among the nation's great mountains, Pikes Peak has a special place in the hearts of Americans. For here, long ago, the majesty and beauty of the peak inspired Catherine Lee Bates to write her immortal song, America the Beautiful. The sight of the mountain has long moved all that see it, not because it is the highest or the most beautiful, but because it rises dramatically out of the Great Plains, a towering beacon that dominates the landscape. Niagara Falls is one of the true wonders of the world. It straddles the American-Canadian border, sharing its majestic beauty with both countries. Every minute, as much as 6 million cubic feet of water tumbles over Niagara Falls. Visitors can watch the falls from a distance or don weatherproof clothing for an up-close boat ride to the base of the falls. 12,000 years ago, the falls were 11 miles downstream from their present location. They've been moving because the natural bedrock of soft shale and limestone is constantly being eroded by the falling water, a process that will forever continue. Our national parks and monuments are a special gift. America is blessed with an abundance of natural wonders, perhaps like no other region of our earth. The National Park Service is dedicated to preserving rare and vanishing plant and animal life and our finest scenic and cultural areas. This is for each of us and for future generations yet to come. No temple carved with hands can compare with Yosemite. Every rock in its walls seemed to glow with life. John Muir used these words to describe what is now Yosemite National Park, a land of dramatic ice-carved valleys, soaring waterfalls, wildlife, and high country wilderness. Crystal clear water, dancing cascades, sparkling streams, roaring waterfalls. In the spring, high country snowmelt plunges into Yosemite Valley from all sides. Bridal Veil Fall drops a spectacular 620 feet. The Merced River, 75 feet wide, plunges downward 317 feet, creating vernal falls. Just above, mighty Nevada Falls is nearly twice as high. In a space of less than 2 miles, the Merced drops about 2,000 feet. Yosemite Falls is the second highest waterfall in the world. At 2,425 feet, its height dwarfs any other falls in the United States. The glaciers that carved Yosemite Valley left behind such recognizable features as El Capitan, Half Dome, and Glacier Point. With elevations from 2,000 to more than 13,000 feet, Yosemite is home to a variety of plant and animal communities, including black bears that occasionally climb trees to search for food. The Mariposa Grove is home to one of the largest sequoia trees in the world. Yosemite Valley is only 1% of the park's total area, so a visit to the high country should not be missed. Over 4,000 feet above the valley floor, the high country is a Sierra wonderland of lakes, streams, and mountains. Tioga Road offers unparalleled vistas and leads to Tuolumne Meadows, a large subalpine meadow alongside the Tuolumne River. When winter comes to the valley, it covers Yosemite and the mighty sequoias of the Mariposa Grove with a soft blanket of snow. Located in the Sierra Nevada range, Sequoia is the nation's second oldest national park. Together with adjacent Kings Canyon National Park, the giant sequoia forests, and the wild backcountry of the Sierra Nevada, over 860,000 acres are preserved. At the western edge of Sequoia, immense Morro Rock offers visitors an inspiring view into the high country. While on the eastern edge towers Mount Whitney, the tallest peak in the contiguous United States. The heart of the Sequoia and Kings Canyon is the almost mystical giant sequoia forests. The massive trees are sprinkled in groves with lush meadows, enchanting wildlife, bubbling streams, and an unmistakable mystique. The major groves are Giant Forest, Grant Grove, and Cedar Grove. Sequoia's backcountry is equally impressive. The wildlife here is enchanting. You might even catch a glimpse of black bears interacting, like these two. The General Sherman tree is the largest living thing on Earth. 274 feet high, 102 feet in circumference at ground level, it weighs over 1,300 tons. Northwest of Giant Forest is Grant Grove, featuring the huge General Grant tree. Forest trails lead to the entrance of Sequoia's Crystal Cave, where flowing water has created large underground chambers and colorful formations. The canyons that make up Kings Canyon National Park range from 4,000 to 8,000 feet deep. In Kings Canyon, a spectacular road leads into the deep canyon of the South Fork of the Kings River. In Northern California, Highway 101 travels through groves of some of the world's tallest trees. We have arrived in Redwood National Park, known for its coastline redwood forests. While these trees may look like giant sequoias, they are not. Coast redwoods are taller and narrower. And while giant sequoias are only found above 5,000 feet elevation, coast redwoods, as their name implies, are found at sea level. Roosevelt elk frequent the Prairie Grove area. As you walk among the giant trees, there are interpretive displays that can help you understand these marvels of nature. Lassen Volcanic National Park was created in recognition of a 1914 eruption that occurred in the Cascade Mountains of Northern California. The park contains nearly every known type of volcanic feature. Beautiful Manzanita Lake lies at the foot of Mount Lassen. Crater Lake was created by the collapse of Mount Mazama, an ancient volcano, after an enormous explosion that covered much of the west and parts of Canada with ash, about 4,860 BC. The resulting lake is one of the most beautiful in the world. Evidence of the violence of that cataclysm still remains. The blast was about 42 times greater than that of Mount St. Helens. Aptly named the Phantom Ship, this unusual island resembles its name. Wizard Island is the last remnant of volcanic activity here. This cinder cone rises 760 feet above the lake. Rim Drive circles the entire lake. Many excellent viewpoints are spaced throughout the rim. At 1,932 feet, it is the second deepest lake on the North American continent. In Grand Teton National Park, the most spectacular mountain peaks in the American Rockies rise up like an impassable barrier. Ancient people first entered the valley now called Jackson Hole about 12,000 years ago. The first white men arrived in the early 1800s. Built well before the park was established, the Chapel of the Transfiguration beckoned to many early settlers from its inspirational setting. The abundance of water is one of the reasons why such a great variety of wild creatures make their home here. Tens of thousands of birds spend at least part of the year in the Tetons. Most are only passing through. Some, like this osprey, live here permanently. Otter, beaver, elk, black bear, and pronghorn are also found year-round in the Teton Range. About 9 million years ago, nature began to create the Tetons. Glaciers shaped the peaks and carved out the valleys, creating beautiful alpine lakes, Jenny and Lee. Visitors enjoy activities from hiking the backcountry trails to canoeing or rafting the winding Snake River. The greater Yellowstone ecosystem, of which Grand Teton is a part, remains one of the most remarkable natural wonders on Earth. Scenery, wildlife, and amazing geothermal features make Yellowstone one of the world's great natural wonders. This high mountain plateau holds a unique combination of features found nowhere else on Earth. The diverse habitats help make Yellowstone special. Abundant rivers and lakes, endless lodgepole forests, and grassy valleys make an ideal habitat for a variety of wildlife. Designated an International Biosphere Preserve, Yellowstone is one of the best places in the world to see animals in their natural environment. In the heart of Yellowstone, historic Old Faithful Inn is a popular and nostalgic stopover. An erupting Old Faithful is Yellowstone's hallmark and symbol. This venerated geyser is the most visited in the world. A natural wonder whose ability to captivate and inspire spans all ages. Park Service rangers will answer your questions about geysers and hot pools. Although these thermal wonders may vary in size and shape, the mechanics of their eruptions are very much alike. Mammoth Hot Springs has no geysers, but features brightly colored terraces formed and sculpted by the mineral-laden water of hot springs. Throughout the park, steaming pools and bubbling mud pots attest to the concentrated geothermal activity that includes Fishing Cone in Yellowstone Lake. Yellowstone Lake is North America's largest lake, above 7,000 feet. It is over 300 feet deep and renowned for boating, fishing, and cutthroat trout. The mighty Yellowstone River gathers momentum and plunges more than 100 feet to create the Upper Falls. Set in this canyon of Yellowstone, magnificent 300-foot Lower Falls is one of the grandest sights in America. These features make this the miracle that is Yellowstone. Glacier National Park is one of the world's most spectacular alpine wilderness areas. The park shares an international border with Canada's Waterton Lakes National Park. The park is a dramatic, ice-carved land of towering mountains, punctuated by sparkling lakes and broad U-shaped valleys. Although there are glaciers here today, the park's name comes from the gigantic landscapes carved eons ago by giant glaciers. The park teems with wildlife, vast forests, and subalpine meadows. The mountains sparkle with roaring streams and dancing waterfalls that feed over 600 lakes. Water flowing down Triple Peak follows one of 3 paths that lead to the Pacific, Atlantic, or Arctic Oceans. The area surrounding Swift Current Lake and Many Glacier Hotel is a hub of activity and popular with day hikers. The hike to Grinnell Glacier is an adventure of discovery. Beautiful St. Mary Lake is one of the park's largest, nearly 10 miles long and 300 feet deep. From here, the magnificent Going to the Sun Road begins, winding its way over one of the most spectacular scenic drives in the country. At Logan Pass, you'll cross the Continental Divide under the grandeur of Mount Clements. The kaleidoscope of landscapes and habitats supports a fascinating variety of wildlife. Grizzly bears, mountain goats, and bighorn sheep are often spotted among the steep terrain. The road winds downward along the massive garden wall, past tumbling waterfalls and cataracts, to tranquil Lake McDonald. This is indeed a land of unsurpassed grandeur. Mount Rainier National Park was established in 1899. At over 14,400 feet, the mountain's huge, rounded shape dominates the land for miles around. Outside of Alaska, it is the largest single peak glacier system in America. Nisqually Glacier measures nearly 4 miles long and constantly changes with the climate. Its great beauty and wide array of wildlife brings countless visitors each year. Prestigious hiking trails attract everyone from the novice user to expert climbers. One of the most popular pathways leads to an old-growth forest called the Grove of the Patriarchs. Here, visitors can view a collection of colossal conifers surrounded by the Ohanapakash River. Roads circling Mount Rainier provide spectacular views from every angle. Stops along the way include the visitor centers at Sunrise and Jackson Memorial at Paradise. Rivers and cascades like the Silver Falls tumble down from melting snows. Fields of wildflowers celebrate the growing season by displaying a beautiful extravaganza of colors. Reflection Lake mirrors the great beauty of this magnificent mountain. At the heart of 1,400 square mile Olympic National Park are the towering Olympic Mountains. About 12 million years ago, this great mass rose from the ocean floor, creating the spectacular landscape. Moisture-laden westerly winds off the Pacific produce a very high amount of rainfall. The western and southern slopes of these mountains receive some of the heaviest rainfall in North America. This has resulted in the only rainforests on the North American continent. The whole rainforest features extraordinary forest growth. Vast areas of mosses, lichens, and ferns cover the trees and ground.
They spawn in the gravels under them.
The west coast of the Olympic Peninsula has one of the most primitive coastlines in the United States. In summer, the alpine slopes are bustling with wildlife. The spectacular view from Hurricane Ridge can be matched by few places in the world. Stretching out before the visitor are the magnificent peaks of the Olympic Range and its 50 or so glaciers. North Cascade National Park lies isolated in the north-central portion of Washington State. It is a true wilderness of rocky peaks, glaciers, and dense evergreen forests. Over 300 snow-clad glaciers cling to icy crags that reach 8,000 to 10,000 feet, more than half of the glaciers found in the lower 48. It is one of our nation's wildest places, with seemingly endless vistas of rugged peaks, striking landscapes, and high waterfalls. North Cascade Highway 20 is a strong entry to win the title of the world's most scenic road. It begins in the west at near sea level and soars to over 7,000 feet, twisting and winding amidst the most rugged mountains and the loveliest valleys that anyone could ever imagine. The land that is Rocky Mountain National Park was set aside in part for its high mountain peaks where tundra dominates the landscape. Fully 1/3 of the park is above the tree line. This is a harsh yet fragile environment where the growing season is short and only the hardiest plants survive. In contrast, the park's lower slopes and valleys are often lush and forested, with a wide variety of wildlife and recreational activities. Hiking trails are very popular around Bear Lake and Hallett's Peak areas. Bighorn sheep are the living symbol of the park and are often found at sheep lakes. Elk herds roam freely and put on a show during the fall elk rut. Trail Ridge Road takes the visitor high into the heart of the park. This exciting road winds up past the timberline into the tundra ecosystem. Over 1/4 of the plants here are also found in the Arctic. Animals like the marmot and pika frequent rock outcrops in this high elevation area. The road reaches its zenith at over 12,000 feet. Spring, summer, and fall lead to the first snows of winter as our visit to Rocky Mountain National Park comes to a close. Rugged and remote, Big Bend National Park is found in southwestern Texas. Its southern border is the Rio Grande River, which has cut 3 narrow, steep-walled canyons: Santa Elena, Mariscal, and Boquillas. There is spectacular river, desert, and mountain scenery, along with fascinating geological features. Visitors are surprised by the great driving distances within Big Bend. The Chisos Mountain Lodge is in the park's most popular area, known simply as the Basin. The Basin is a steep-walled, grassy valley. A hike to the south rim of the Chisos Mountains is a high point for the adventurous. Big Bend is a land of startling contrasts. A vast, dry desert, a fertile river floodplain, and the green oasis of the high mountains. Even for Texas, this is an extraordinary place. Carlsbad Caverns is one of the world's most important natural caves. One of our first stops is at Devil's Spring. Along the way, we come upon the Whale's Mouth and the Baby Hippo. Iceberg Rock is located at the 650-foot level. It is a giant rock that collapsed during the early development of the caverns. The King's Highway winds its way through the King's Palace, with its vaulted ceiling garlanded with countless stalactites. The King's Palace is thought by many to be the most beautiful room in the caverns. The Eternal Kiss is a stalactite and a stalagmite that almost touch. Passing through the keyhole leads to the Queen's Orchestra, a clustered formation resembling an alien orchestra playing in the depths of the earth. Leaving the Queen's chambers, we enter the Papoose Room. These splendid draperies have been colored by trace minerals such as iron oxide. One startling stalagmite has an ancient bat preserved in stone. Our tour brings us again to another section of the King's Palace. It is truly a royal hall of breathtaking size and splendor. The Grape Arbor leads to the Big Room, the largest underground chamber that you will ever visit. It is over 1/4 mile in length. The room includes the Sword of Damocles, the giant domes in the Hall of Giants, a lion's tail, the Temple of the Sun, even the breast of Venus, the Rock of Ages, and flowing from the ceiling to the floor, the frozen Niagara, the small but impressive painted grotto, and the delicate Dolls Theater. The caverns are summer home to Mexican free-tailed bats that swarm out each evening to feed. In sharp contrast, Colorado's semi-arid canyons of Mesa Verde National Park conceal the most extensive ancient Indian pueblos in the United States. These great cities under the cliffs date back to AD 1200, although some earlier pueblos on the mesa top were built as early as AD 750. These ancestral Puebloans were once called Anasazi, which means enemy ancestor. Measuring 86 feet high, Square Tower House Ruin is the tallest in the park. At one time, 5,000 people may have lived at Mesa Verde. Cliff Palace was discovered in 1888, the largest cliff dwelling in North America. Earlier cliff dwellers may have moved from the mesa tops to these cliff cities for protection against some feared enemy, or perhaps just for shelter. Balcony House was built on a high, easily defended ledge. A 3-foot-high wall might have kept youngsters from toppling over the cliff. Never completed, Sun Temple was the peak of the Golden Age before the Puebloans vanished about AD 1350. Water played an important part in the life of the Puebloans, and they created a series of impressive water systems to divert and conserve it. The first Pueblo people built semi-underground pit houses. Over several centuries, their villages evolved, expanding into the great pueblos that remain today as an eloquent monument to a talented people. Bryce Canyon National Park is one of nature's geological masterpieces. Located in southwestern Utah, Bryce Canyon is not a canyon at all. It is a series of spectacular amphitheaters eroded out of the cliffs over eons of time. The intricate handiwork of this erosion is evident, creating brightly colored pinnacles and spires. Imaginative names describe fanciful forms like Thor's hammer, and the sinking ship. The Natural Bridge is a formation that always catches the visitor's eye. Navajo Trail is one of the park's most popular, descending 500 feet into the canyon maze. Here below the rim, the visitor can appreciate the scale of Bryce, to absorb the shapes and contrasts of light and color in these tangled canyons. It is a land eroded not by wind, but by water, in the form of rain, ice, and snow. Another way to explore the many trails is by horseback. From below, the sculpted windows and other points of interest are fully visible. Bryce most certainly is one of the jewels of the national park system. It doesn't take long after entering Zion National Park to become impressed by the size of the landscapes, huge sandstone monoliths, and enormous towering walls. The meandering Virgin River created Zion Canyon with its sheer 3,000-foot cliffs. Over time, the river has scoured and carved this narrow canyon. Quiet most of the time, it can become a raging torrent. A visit to Zion can inspire feelings of peace and reverence. Early pioneers bestowed names such as West Temple, Pulpit, and Angel's Landing. A trip into the valley brings the visitor to rustic Zion Lodge. Nearby is a trail to Emerald Pool. Weeping Rock is a popular visitor spot. Here, water seeping down through porous rock emerges from the canyon wall. One of the most adventurous trails in Zion is the Narrows. Hikers get their feet wet in the Virgin River on this exciting and sometimes strenuous trip. Zion's mix of desert, canyon, and river habitat supports a varied wildlife population. The word Zion implies reverence, a place of solitude and quiet, of peace and refuge. One visit and you'll know why early settlers gave it this name. Arches National Park lies at the heart of southeast Utah's Red Rock country. To some, the park may seem a region of strange, exotic landforms, but there is much more. It's as if nature's imagination was allowed to run rampant. The shapes and sizes of rock forms seem unlimited. One of the most popular with visitors is huge balanced rock, Park Avenue, Sheep Rock, the Three Gossips, Courthouse Towers, the Eye of the Whale, Hole in the Wall, Double Arch, the Spectacles, and Turret Arch. The 114 square mile park contains over 1,500 arches. They were created by erosion from wind, water, and ice. Although the full geologic story is more complex. Landscape Arch at 306 feet is among the world's longest. And Exquisite Delicate Arch is a symbol of Red Rock country. Even in this arid landscape, there is life-giving water. The desert wildlife is abundant, but much of it is nocturnal and not easily seen. Arches is indeed a special place. Adjacent to Arches lies vast and primitive Canyonlands National Park. It has been carved by the powerful forces of the Colorado and Green Rivers. These gorges have been created over 150 million years. The rivers slowly cutting their way deeper into the plateau's rock strata. They have carved it into three very different regions. Island in the Sky, the Needles, and the Maze. Canyonlands is a red rock landscape with incredible formations at every turn. Early primitive cultures have all vanished now, but through a rich legacy of ruins and prehistoric Indian rock art, they are not forgotten. The park was established in 1964. Its rocky wilderness terrain defies easy overland travel. Just like the early pioneers, traveling by horseback or on foot is often the best way to explore. Canyonlands is primitive, remote, and strikingly different. It offers an opportunity to discover wild America. Each year, millions of people come to visit the most astonishing landscape in the world, the Grand Canyon. As much as a mile deep, 277 miles long, and up to 18 miles across, its breathtaking beauty and scope leave most visitors inspired and overwhelmed. About 65 million years ago, forces within the earth uplifted this area. As the land rose, the raging Colorado River began the long process of erosion that formed this enormous canyon. Today, the river continues its work while also providing thrills for adventurous rafters. A favored way to reach the canyon is on the Grand Canyon Railway. The journey begins at Williams, traveling 65 miles to the Grand Canyon. The journey ends at the world-famous El Tovar Hotel. The El Tovar is located in the village, the center of visitor activity. The Hopi House forms the background for presentations by authentic Hopi dancers. The visitor center is also found here. One of the more popular adventures is the mule trip to the bottom of the gorge to Phantom Ranch. Duck on a Rock is one of an infinite variety of rock shapes and forms found in the canyon. Near the east entrance, the watchtower gives us a final grand view of the Grand Canyon. The north rim of the Grand Canyon offers a different perspective. Although visitation here is small compared to the south rim, the grandeur is just as overwhelming. The geology here is every bit as fascinating as the south rim, and ranger-guided tours can help you to better understand the forces that shaped this gigantic landscape and made the Grand Canyon grand indeed. The Petrified Forest National Park includes the colorful Painted Desert. About 200 million years ago, this area was a tropical marshy forest. As the massive trees died and fell, shifting streams covered them with mud. Chemical reactions within the trees slowly turn them to quartz crystals, often duplicating the original wood patterns in perfect detail. Many think of Death Valley National Park as a hot, inhospitable place, frequented only by sandstorms and rattlesnakes. Early settlers might have agreed. Attempts to cross the valley in summer's appalling temperatures sometimes ended tragically. But Death Valley is also a tremendously diverse landscape with unique plant and wildlife communities. Death Valley is full of fascinating places, such as Badwater, the lowest spot on the American continent. Devil's Golf Course. Mysterious rocks that move about a dry lake bed. At the visitor center, rangers describe the valley's plant and animal life.
Mexican tea, they call it that too, yeah.
The tiny endangered pupfish is still found here, along with a surprising variety of birds, reptiles, and mammals. Scenic drives lead to many of the valley's unusual attractions, including the Devil's Cornfield, Ubehebe Crater, Artist Palette, where riotous colors hinted to early explorers that there was mineral wealth. Bizarre Mushroom Rock, nearby ghost towns, and Scotty's Castle, whose caretaker, Death Valley Scotty, helped make the valley famous. The Great Smoky Mountains National Park is located in the eastern United States, a part of the Appalachian Mountain Range. It is a land of great beauty and diversity. The mountains are among the oldest on Earth, created around 300 million years ago. The first pioneers came here in the late 1700s. They began to farm, making use of whatever land was accessible. Today, some of the early culture has been preserved by the National Park Service within the park boundaries. Places like Cades Cove and Oconaluftee appear much as they were then. Hundreds of miles of streams and rivers wind their way through ancient forests. Countless waterfalls vibrate the forest floors. A wide range of elevations and abundant rainfall support a diversity of plants and animals. There are 1,600 species of flowering plants and over 4,000 species of non-flowering plants and shrubs. There are 5 distinct forest types with over 100 species of trees, 70 different mammals, and over 200 different species of birds. The annual fall colors of the Smokies attract visitors from near and far as the colors flow down from the higher peaks to the valley floors. Cades Cove is one of the most beautiful and productive areas of the park. Each May, descendants of those early settlers return to Cades Cove to celebrate mountain lore through song and dance on Old Timers Day. The Great Smoky Mountains are great indeed. Acadia National Park is located off the coast of Maine on rugged Mount Desert Island. It is a 35,000-acre preserve of natural beauty and the second most visited of our national parks. Enormous glaciers, some a mile in height, carve mountains that rise abruptly out of the sea. These glaciers scour the island, leaving many signs of their passing. The evergreen and deciduous forests that cover much of the park add to the variety of the beauty found here. Cadillac Mountain at 1,500 feet is the highest point on the eastern seaboard. From the top, a visitor is offered a stunning panorama of the surrounding island and the ocean to the east. Paved roads encompass the island. Visitors may also enjoy traveling 45 miles of historic carriage roads in an authentic horse-drawn carriage, although it can be a little dusty at times. Bicycling is a popular pastime at Acadia, providing an access to areas more difficult to reach by car. Wildlife abounds in Acadia and includes a wide variety of seabirds. Several charming lighthouses dot the rugged coast, including this one at Bass Harbor Head. Fishing is both a living and a vacation pastime. Adjacent, picturesque Bar Harbor is alive with activity during the summer and fall. You may want to take a scenic boat excursion from the harbor. The great beauty of this wilderness park draws people from around the world. It's easy to see why. Of all the great caverns, one stands alone for its immense size. Mammoth Cave of Kentucky has the distinction of being the world's largest.
And the appreciation of what Mammoth Cave is comes from the understanding of its vastness.
Mammoth Cave National Park lies amidst a vast area of winding rivers and hardwood forests. This is the most diverse cave ecosystem in the world. It has been designated a World Heritage Site for its spectacular features both on the surface and underground. These limestone caverns have been created by water flowing underground for eons of time. The National Park Service offers a variety of ranger-guided tours of Mammoth. One of the most popular is the Historic Tour. It begins at the natural entrance and opens almost directly into a vast underground room called the Rotunda. Huge quantities of saltpeter, a major ingredient in gunpowder, was mined here and made a significant contribution to the successful outcome of the War of 1812. Beyond the Rotunda lies the immense Broadway, a great avenue created long ago by a mighty underground river. Indians played an important part in the prehistoric exploration of the caves. Rangers provide a glimpse into that distant past. Most visitors are amazed to learn that this is not a lifeless world. About 130 animal species are regular inhabitants, and a third of these are fully cave adapted. Fat Man's Misery is aptly named. The high point of any visit is the awesome spectacle of the 192-foot-high Mammoth Dome. Within the giant dome, a vertical staircase known as the Tower carries visitors up to a different level of the cave. The Frozen Niagara is another popular tour. The descent down some 300 steps is one not too soon forgotten. The trail traverses through a maze of corridors and formations until finally climaxing at the magnificent Frozen Niagara. The Rainbow Room and adjacent area is one of the wetter portions of the caverns, and it is here that you will find the greatest and most varied formations. A visit to Mammoth Cave will always be remembered as the joy of experiencing nature at its best. On the southeast coast of Florida, 180,000-acre Biscayne National Park is 95% water. It protects the coral reefs, sea life, and some of the world's finest stands of mangrove forests. Elliott Key is the largest of the islands. It offers a fine harbor and boat tours, along with a variety of water sports. A nature trail crosses the island through a hardwood hammock. Adams Key is for day use only. Sand Key has a unique man-made keyhole-shaped harbor. In the early days, Boca Chica and all of the keys were an operational base for pirates. A highlight of any Biscayne tour is a trip in a glass-bottom boat. Rangers will point out the endangered manatees, spectacular coral reefs, and the wonderful world that lies below. Everglades National Park lies in southern Florida, a mysterious and fascinating ecological world. It's a sanctuary for land and water birds, fish, endangered manatees, the rare American crocodile, and the ever-present alligator. The important anhinga is named for this unique native bird. After foraging in the water, it has to hang out its wings to dry. Alligators may pop up just about anywhere. Raised boardwalks circle over the sawgrass marshland, enabling visitors to observe the intimate details of life that dwells in these ponds and grasslands. Pinelands once covered an extensive area of the Everglades. Trails now provide a close-up encounter with these trees. Insects, birds, and a wide variety of wildlife abound in the Everglades. Mahogany Hammock displays the country's largest mahogany tree. Cypress domes are found in the wetter areas of the park. Ranger-guided tours are available. During the dry season, alligators keep the water holes open by sweeping them with their powerful tails, dredging out the shallow ponds upon which all life in the swamps depend. During the ranger-guided canoeing and mudraking tours, countless critters may be observed, including hermit crabs. Tram tours to the observation tower in Shark Valley offer spectacular scenic views and a wide range of wildlife for the visitor to enjoy. Because of man, life hangs by a delicate thread here, and ironically, it's up to man to ensure the preservation of this wonderful domain. Mount McKinley in the Alaska Range dominates Denali National Park. It rises 20,320 feet, the highest peak in North America. The original park, established in 1917, has now been expanded to over 6 million acres, primarily for the protection and preservation of one of the largest concentrations of wildlife in North America. The outstanding visitor center provides excellent orientation for tourists. You can travel into the park only by bus. Depending on the weather, tours may reach as far as 55 miles into the park for a magnificent view of Mount McKinley. The first glimpse of a grizzly bear is a moment never to be forgotten. These great bears must gain enough weight during the season to carry them through their winter hibernation, or they won't survive. The bus makes frequent stops. Here at Toklat River Crossing, your guide will explain many details of the park. Caribou are seriously harassed by the botfly. At times, they will run wildly to rid themselves of the pests. At a rest stop, we look back at the graded road we have just traveled. It is marked by precipices that plunge 1,000 feet or more. The Dall sheep is related to the bighorn. No other mammal can match their climbing ability. The climax of the tour is reached at Stony Hill, where, weather permitting, you can view Mount McKinley. This great mountain and the Alaskan Range were uplifted by the head-on collision of two tectonic plates. No wonder the Athabascan Indians named it Denali, meaning the High One. Alaska's Glacier Bay National Park is a 3 million acre wilderness area accessible only by plane or boat. On boat tours, you travel through iceberg-covered seas and pass close to mighty glaciers. They are constantly splitting off giant icebergs, some with explosive force, much to the delight of visitors. Glacier Bay became a national monument in 1925 and a national park in 1980. 200 years ago, the 2,000-foot thick glacier filled the bay. Since that time, it has retreated 65 miles. Visiting Glacier Bay is like traveling back through time. New land that has not seen the light of day for thousands of years is emerging as the glacier continues to retreat. The volcanic process that formed the tropical islands of Hawaii is still very much underway on the Big Island. Hawaii Volcanoes National Park encompasses over 350 square miles and includes portions of both Mauna Loa and Kilauea volcanoes. Lava flows and fiery rivers to the sea not only in the park, but in other areas of the island as well. It steams and sizzles as it flows into open water. Many areas of the island have lava flowing underneath the hard surface, just waiting to break through. Lava vents can also be found here. This all continues an island building process that is millions of years old. Along with growth also comes destruction. Many trees on the island are virtually frozen in time as a hard black shell surrounds them. Frequently used roads and buildings will never be accessible again. Thurston Lava Tube is an amazing sight. Inside is a dark, mysterious world formed from dark volcanic ash, but outside it is covered with trees and plants giving new life to a once inhospitable enclave. The designation of national monument differs from a national park in that monuments are typically smaller. and do not have the diversity of national parks. However, their primary feature may be just as beautiful or important. The fossil-rich region of Dinosaur National Monument is located in Utah, at the east end of the Uintas Range. It is a barren and yet beautiful land, set amid a geological spectacle of fascinating landscapes. The Green River, primary tributary of the Colorado, flows through the arid land. It has cut and formed this region over millions of years. The National Monument has numerous ancient archaeological sites. Many of its petroglyphs are among the finest in the state. One of the most popular is simply called the Lizard. The Quarry Visitor Center is perhaps the most unique dinosaur attraction in the world. The striking glass structure is built flush against a tilting ledge, enclosing the face of the quarry, where the dinosaur fossils are embedded. Inside, exhibits display fossils, models, and artwork depicting the variety of dinosaurs found here. Staff members are available to answer your questions. But most amazingly, you can see actual jumbled dinosaur bones just as they were deposited millions of years ago in river sand. The bone-bearing rock layer is about 8 to 12 feet thick. The fossil bones are left intact, embedded in the rock. Talented technicians carefully chisel, removing enough rock to outline each bone in sharp relief. They have created an astounding exhibit of an ancient dinosaur graveyard from 14 million years ago. Many people lost their lives when Mount St. Helens erupted in May 1980. The Washington State volcano previously had not erupted in 123 years. The incredibly powerful eruption lowered the summit of the mountain by over 1,300 feet, sending a blast of destructive pyroclastic gases along with hot rock, mud, and ash to the north and northeast, destroying most every living thing in a 230 square mile area. Millions of trees were decimated. Beautiful Spirit Lake was destroyed. Today, at what is now Mount St. Helens National Volcanic Monument, the Visitor Center offers a close-up look at the devastation and the renewal process. Plants and animals have begun to reclaim this once sterile area. But it may take another 200 years before the land is returned to its pre-eruption state. Chaco Culture National Historic Park is located in northwestern New Mexico and preserves one of America's richest and most fascinating cultural and historic Indian areas. Chaco Canyon was a major center of incredible size and variety for the ancestral Puebloan culture between AD 850 and 1250. It is unlike anything seen before or since. Chaco is remarkable for its monumental and ceremonial buildings of vast size and complexity. In addition, these amazing people built roads, still usable today, ramps, dams, and mounds. The Chacoan people combined pre-planned architectural designs, astronomical observations, geometry, landscaping, and engineering to create an ancient urban center of spectacular public architecture. One that still inspires. Sunset Crater Volcano National Monument was established in 1930 to preserve this starkly beautiful geological site. The massive 1,000-foot-high volcanic cinder cone was built up by successive eruptions over a period of time beginning about 1,000 years ago. Hiking trails lead visitors into the lava fields and nearby viewpoints, but because of the danger of erosion, climbing on the volcano itself is not allowed. Soon after the volcano's main eruption, a general migration began throughout the Southwest. Improved environmental conditions and possibly increased rainfall brought about a new period of growth for the region. The park's visitor center offers a close look at the history of this fragile landmark. America's historic sites are places that commemorate important events or persons from the nation's history. Many of the most significant are administered by the National Park Service or by nonprofit foundations. They encompass our nation's most revered locations. The famous warship Old Ironsides, officially the USS Constitution, is tied up in Charlestown, Massachusetts, across the Charles River from Boston. She was launched in Boston in 1797. She's been part of the U.S. Navy since that date and is the oldest commissioned warship in the world. She never lost a battle, and there's no record that an enemy shot ever pierced her great wooden hull. It's up to 25 inches thick in places. This fact earned her the nickname Old Ironsides. Her officers and crew are regular members of the Navy. The captain's cabin is included in tours of the ship. The crew is also familiar with shipboard procedures, appropriate for this old three-masted frigate, most of them anyway. Old Ironsides, just below the Bunker Hill Monument, is a national treasure that holds a special place in the hearts of all Americans. Minuteman National Historical Park in Lexington and Concord, Massachusetts, commemorates the opening battle of the American Revolution. This was on April 19, 1775. The first shots against the British were actually fired that day on Lexington Green. The Redcoats, seeking hidden powder, marched on to the North Bridge at Concord. Minutemen Patriot militiamen opposed them in a running battle back to Boston. The day before, Paul Revere had alerted his countrymen to the British movements, responding to lantern signals in the tower of Boston's Old North Church. The church, the statue, and Paul Revere's home are part of the city's walking tour called the Freedom Trail. Faneuil Hall, Patriot Meeting Place, is also included. By June 17, 1775, at Bunker Hill, many Americans were committed to the Revolution in earnest, and the war had begun. Independence National Historical Park is in the center of Philadelphia. This is the place where the Declaration of Independence and the United States Constitution were created. Independence Hall is the principal attraction for most visitors. Living history presentations in the hall show something of the world in which the Founding Fathers lived and worked. Here in the Assembly Room, the Declaration was debated, and here on July 4, 1776, it was approved. The Constitution was composed in this same room in 1787. The Liberty Bell is housed in a nearby pavilion. When it hung in the hall steeple, it was rung only for special events, such as the first public reading of the Declaration. The Liberty Bell and Independence Hall are both American icons. Mount Vernon, home of George Washington, stands on a bluff above the Potomac River, about 15 miles below Washington, D.C. The mansion itself and a number of outbuildings are restored and furnished as they were when the general and his wife Martha lived here in the last half of the 18th century. Washington isn't usually thought of as an architect, yet the design of Mount Vernon was largely his. The splendid piazza is a noteworthy achievement. The general was often away on affairs of war and government. He sent back a stream of instructions for improving the home and grounds. Mount Vernon was a working plantation. When he was here, Washington personally oversaw the farms, fisheries, and other businesses. Martha ran the large and busy household from her desk in their bedroom. Most domestic work was done in the outbuildings. The kitchen occupied one. In the spinning house, yarn was made from wool and flax was produced on the estate. Like most southern plantations of its time, Mount Vernon was worked by slaves. Some lived here. Washington slaves were freed after Martha's death. Mount Vernon's lovely west parlor was the center of Washington's social life. The number of guest bedrooms reflect their generous hospitality. The large dining room was used for the formal affairs that Washington's fame and position required. His own personal preference was always for small groups of friends and family. After an extraordinarily rich and useful life, George Washington died in his bed in 1799. He's buried here at Mount Vernon in a simple tomb beside his wife Martha. His gracious home, lovingly maintained, is a majestic tribute. Yorktown Battlefield is near the eastern end of Colonial Parkway in Virginia. Here in 1781, General George Washington forced the surrender of a large British army and virtually ended the American Revolution. Many early colonial buildings remain here. The Nelson House, showplace of colonial Yorktown, has been restored. Grace Church dates from around 1697 and still serves its congregation. The National Park Service Visitor Center displays Washington's sleeping tent and offers other interpretive displays and activities. Despite rows of heavy siege guns and several reconstructed fortifications, it's the neat frame house of Augustine Moore that most attracts visitors. Here in this room, the American Revolution virtually ended. The American Civil War began on April 12, 1861 with the attack on Fort Sumter and ended on April 12, 1865 with the surrender of General Robert E. Lee at Appomattox. It was the bloodiest conflict in American history, with over 620,000 Americans killed in battle and twice that number dead by disease. 50,000 survivors returned home amputees. On January 31, 1865, slavery was abolished by the 13th Amendment to the United States Constitution. Today, the United States preserves many historic Civil War sites in memory of those who perished in this dreadful conflict. The National Park Service plays a primary role in administering and interpreting the events played out on these hallowed grounds. Fort Sumter National Monument is located on Sullivan's Island in the harbor of Charleston, South Carolina. Visitors can reach it by boat. The first battle of the Civil War took place at Sumter. The fort has changed greatly since it was surrendered to Confederate forces on April 14, 1861. During a later siege of nearly 2 years, it was battered into rubble by Federal naval guns. The officers' quarters, originally a 3-story brick building, stretched along this wall. Unexploded shells can still be seen buried in the masonry. There are even a number of Fort Sumter's guns, looking as fierce now as they did in wartime. The National Park Service presents interpretive talks for each boat trip, making everyone's visit to Fort Sumter worthwhile. The city of Fredericksburg, Virginia, is about 50 miles southwest of Washington, D.C. Here and in the surrounding area, 4 major battles of the Civil War were fought. Much of the battlefield terrain and related sites are now administered as Fredericksburg, Spotsylvania National Military Park. Park headquarters is in this 18th century mansion named Chatham. Its lovely grounds belie the fact that in wartime it was a federal headquarters and field hospital. The National Cemetery on Marie's Heights at Fredericksburg and the stone wall below it mark places where the Confederates inflicted huge federal losses. The nearby memorial to Richard Kirkland honors a Confederate soldier who gave water and comfort to wounded and dying Federals. Old Salem Church west of town was a battle scene, a shelter, and a hospital. The Chancellorsville Tavern was destroyed in the fighting, and its site is marked. In that battle, Stonewall Jackson was accidentally shot by his own men. He died in the small building 15 miles south of Fredericksburg. Spotsylvania's Bloody Angle saw savage hand-to-hand fighting, the last of that battle. But nearly another year of war elsewhere still lay ahead. Vicksburg National Military Park is one of the country's most beautiful Civil War sites. Its main area curves around to the north and east of downtown Vicksburg on the Mississippi River. The park commemorates the Federal and Confederate struggle for control of the city. 2 Union attacks failed. After a 47-day siege, Vicksburg and its defenders surrendered July 3, 1863. The main park road is a loop, mostly one way. At the beginning, Its entire first half follows the Union siege line, and the monuments are those of northern states. After about its midpoint, the road is on the Confederate defense line, and Southern memorials are seen. The Shirley House is the only remaining wartime building in the park. Its exterior has been restored. Nearby, the Illinois Memorial is the largest and most spectacular at Vicksburg. The state supplied half the federal forces engaged here. At the north end of the park is one of the most astonishing relics of the Civil War, the USS Cairo. This ironclad was sunk in 1862 north of Vicksburg by a mine, then called a torpedo. In the 1960s, she was miraculously raised and preserved. Many other shipboard items were salvaged with her and are displayed in the nearby museum. Fort Hill anchored the left flank of the Confederate defense lines. From this point, the Park Road passes many Southern memorials. Missouri was divided in her loyalties, and the state's monument is dedicated to her sons on both sides. The fighting men of Mississippi are honored with a 75-foot granite obelisk. Near the end of the tour road is the Iowa Memorial. There is perhaps no finer bronze sculpture to be found in any Civil War monument. The color bearer at the center somehow seems now to personify the noblest virtues of the soldiers of both sides. Gettysburg National Military Park is located in south-central Pennsylvania. This was the site of the climactic battle of the American Civil War. For the first-time visitor, the great variety of monuments makes the strongest impression. Generally, they're located where the person or unit commemorated was prominent in the action of battle. This was a fierce and complex engagement that took place during the first 3 days of July in 1863. The National Park Service offers exhibits and talks that help to explain the significance and the tactics of the battle. Confederate General Robert E. Lee, after a series of victories, invaded the North, hoping to stimulate foreign aid. General George Meade commanded the Union Army that met him here. The areas fought over in the first days of clashes are now dominated by the Eternal Light Peace Memorial, dedicated on the 75th anniversary of the battle. The second day of fighting created immortal names in American history: the Peach Orchard, Devil's Den, and Little Round Top. The third day at Gettysburg was climaxed by the Confederate attack called Pickett's Charge. It's best presented by the huge panoramic painting of it in the Cyclorama building. Lee's plan was to break the Union's army in two. He failed. And the next day, July 4th, 1863, his army retreated to Virginia. Lee had reached the high water mark of the Confederacy. He would get no farther north. A little over 4 months after Gettysburg, President Abraham Lincoln delivered his address near where the Soldiers' National Monument now stands. His simple, deathless words have drawn us closer to Gettysburg, and also to Billy Yank and Johnny Reb. Appomattox Courthouse National Historical Park is located in south-central Virginia. Here in 1865, for most Americans, the Civil War came to an end. The National Park Service has restored much of the village to its appearance at that time. The courthouse was a busy place, for this was the county seat. It was also a convenient stopover for travelers. Clover Hill Tavern offered meals and accommodations. Meek's store sold a variety of goods and medicines, and was also the post office. There were several substantial homes in the village, such as the handsome Isbell House. However, the Maria Wright House, dating from the 1820s, was more typical of the region. But history has made the home of Wilmer McLean one of the most famous in the nation. In the McLean front parlor on April 9, 1865, General Lee surrendered to General Grant. Statue of Liberty National Monument is located in New York Harbor. This internationally recognized symbol of American liberty was a gift of friendship from France to the United States and was dedicated in 1886. Visitors reach Liberty Island by ferry from the Battery in Lower Manhattan. From the ground to the torch, the statue and its pedestal rise over 300 feet. Exhibits and the pedestal observation deck are accessible by elevator, but it's a 22-story climb by stairs to the viewing area in the crown. The same ferry calls at nearby Ellis Island. This was the nation's entry point for millions of immigrants from 1892 to 1924. The main building has been beautifully restored through donations from descendants of the original immigrants. The names of over 400,000 contributors are carved on the American Immigrant Wall of Honor. Washington, D.C. has more famous places of interest than any other city in America. The United States Capitol and the area around it can truly be called a showplace. To much of the world, the Capitol Dome symbolizes America. In the vast rotunda under the dome are paintings of famous historical scenes. The Lincoln Memorial represents both emancipation and national reunion. Inside, the statue of Abraham Lincoln has attracted not only visitors and sightseers, but all those who singly or in great throngs see it as a place of inspiration. At the opposite end of a long reflecting basin, the Washington Monument perpetuates the memory of the first U.S. president. It's the tallest structure in the city. From the top, the entire Capitol is spread out below. The Jefferson Memorial is nearby, honoring the third president, who was also the author of the Declaration of Independence. There's no more impressive monument in the Capitol than the Vietnam Memorial. On its black marble wall are the names of the missing and the dead in that far-off conflict. The White House is the home of America's chief executive, and the Oval Office is virtually synonymous with the presidency. The public rooms and those for guests and official business all reflect a graceful elegance. There are private rooms for the president and his family. The National Air and Space Museum, part of the Smithsonian Complex, is one of the world's most popular museums. The Wright brothers' pioneering biplane of 1903 is here. So is the Spirit of St. Louis, from Lindbergh's famous solo flight of 1927. A copy of the Apollo 11 lunar module, Eagle, represents an American triumph in space. The National Gallery of Art houses one of the world's finest collections of paintings, sculpture, and graphic arts. The National Museum of Natural History specializes in the natural sciences and human culture. The extensive dinosaur exhibit are among the most popular. The National Museum of American History houses the original Star-Spangled Banner, which inspired our national anthem. The ornate Library of Congress is one of the world's most extensive research facilities, open to all. The Declaration of Independence is displayed in the National Archives with the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. Washington National Cathedral dominates a hilltop a few miles north of the city's heart. Both in size and beauty, the cathedral awes all who visit it. In stone and stained glass, in light and splendor, the building's magnificence makes it truly national, a house of prayer for all people. The Iwo Jima, or Marine Corps Memorial, is across the Potomac River from Washington. On a bluff next to Arlington National Cemetery, the seemingly endless rows of headstones touch the heart. The tomb of the unknown soldier is here. Washington, D.C. is in every way the nation's capital. Mount Rushmore National Memorial rises high in the very heart of America. It is our shrine to democracy and one of the nation's most revered places. It was created by American sculptor Gutzon Borglum. The story of its creation is one of artistic drive on a colossal scale. In 1927, President Calvin Coolidge presented Borglum with a set of drills, and the work began. No one had ever carved a mountain before, so new techniques had to be developed. After Mount Rushmore was selected as the site, the rock surface was blasted off, and men in slings scrambled across the new surface using jackhammers and dynamite. After final shaping, the surface was smoothed with small air hammers. Washington's face, though still incomplete, was unveiled on July 4th, 1930. The carving followed a 20-foot model. Borglum, with his son Lincoln, oversaw the entire project. Carving continued simultaneously on all four heads, and the memorial was dedicated in the summer of 1936 by President Franklin Roosevelt.
10,000 years from now.
Many years ago, Gutzon Borglum presented his feelings about the work. Let us place there, carved high as close to heaven as we can, our leaders, their faces, to show posterity what manner of men they were. Then breathe a prayer that these records will endure until the wind and the rain alone shall wear them away. Discover America is an accurate description of what you have just seen and heard. America is blessed, like no other, with beauty and variety whose scope defies comprehension. From our vast national park system, of which there is nothing comparable in the world, to an astounding diversity of nature and works of the people, all of these seem fitting for the land of the free and the home of the brave.